On this special programme, water, the source of life. But the world is facing a water crisis. It's becoming an ever more precious commodity, and the fight over access to it is becoming ever more fierce. The people most affected by the shortage are those who search for it, collect it, carry it, and eke it out among their families. I'm Shuli Ghosh. This week on Every Woman, we look at women and the politics of water. Hello and welcome to the programme. Clean water is essential for life, but across the world, over 1 billion people don't have it. The global water shortage directly affects people's livelihoods and well-being, and it's a crisis that's getting worse. Every year, 2.2 million people die because of unsafe drinking water and poor sanitation. And according to the UN, 2/3 of people on the planet will face some degree of water shortage by the year 2025. But it's women who bear the brunt. Many in the developing world already spend most of their waking hours in search of clean water. Its scarcity impacts on household chores, child rearing and food production. Maude Barlow is one of the world's leading experts on the politics of water. In her book, Blue Gold, she says, water promises to be to the 21st century what oil was to the 20th century, the precious commodity that determines the wealth of nations. Well, she joins us now from Baltimore in the US. Maude, thank you very much for talking to us. First of all, why is there a water crisis and why is it getting worse?
Well, it's really an important question because, of course, we all learned that there's a closed hydrologic cycle and the water couldn't go anywhere except come back to us. But what our teachers didn't know and they couldn't teach us was that we were able to pollute as a human species the surface water of the world so badly that we're now collectively mining the groundwater far faster than it can be replenished by nature. So we're actually destroying the world's freshwater systems to the point where close to 2 billion people in the world now live in what are called water-stressed regions. It's not just pollution, however. We're actually talking about running out of water in major parts of the world. We are, as one scientist said to me, like the Earth is like an apple. It's still green in many parts on the surface, but there are brown spots, what they call hot stains, from the inside. And the world water crisis is the ground level equivalent of greenhouse gas emissions and global warming. It is just as much a cause, in my opinion, as greenhouse gas emissions towards the drying of the planet.
And in those areas where water is scarce, the whole community is suffering, but the people who bear the burden are the women.
Yes, always and everywhere where there's a water crisis. First of all, there's deep inequity, of course, between the so-called first world and the third world. Even though there are some water-scarce regions in the first world, like parts of the Middle East, the United States, Australia are 3 examples, the vast majority of people living without water live in poor areas of the world, India, China, Latin America, Africa, and the vast majority of the people there who are responsible and who bear the biggest brunt are women. Women are the ones who are responsible for finding the water, for cooking, for taking care of their families, for the health of their families. We're even seeing a rise in wife assault in communities where the man comes home after the day, whatever he's been doing, and the wife was responsible for finding water. She wasn't able to find it, so there's no dinner, there's no, nothing to wash with, and so she gets beaten. And we're actually seeing, again, an increase in this.
And of course, this comes against a background, as you've written in your book, that water is becoming big business. It's moving from being a basic right to a commodity.
That's right. Many large corporations knew before the rest of us that water was going to become a kind of blue gold and more valuable than anything. And if they could control it, they would have a great deal of power. This is a very important issue because if we don't take public control of water and if we don't have access to and control over our local water supplies, we're going to find that corporations own the very essence of life and will deny it to those who cannot pay for it.
OK, Maude, don't go away. Do stay with us because we're going to look more closely at the issue of access to water. Most people assume it's more of a problem in rural areas, but it can be just as difficult in urban areas too. Every Woman met 2 women in Tanzania.
Sunrise in Zigero, a remote rural village in eastern Tanzania. It's the end of the rainy season and water is becoming increasingly scarce. Zaytouni has spent most of the night unable to sleep, trying to guard her crops from wild pigs. But today's greatest challenge still lies ahead.
Kusema kweli, maji ni tatizo. Ninapoamka asubuhi, nikiona ndani maji hamna, ndo kama hivi kupata ndoo moja kama hii, na umbali wenyewe ndo kama ule.
She has to fetch water from a natural spring which is a whole hour away.
Ndo kama hivi mnavyoyaona maji yalivyo. Kwa shida tulizokuwepo nazo tunatumia. Sasa tufanyaje? Tutachagua maji tutayapata wapi mazuri?
Soon it will be the height of the dry season and this spring will dry up.
Kuanzia mwezi wa 8 mpaka wa 9 wake hamna maji yanayopatikanika hapa. Tunalala siku 3, mtu sengine hujapata maji.
But it's not only in rural areas that water is a problem. Even in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania's largest city and the country's economic and political centre, the search for water dominates many people's lives.
Mimi naitwa Flaviana Nijuka, nina watoto 2 na ni mwanamke mjane. Kwa kweli maji kwangu ni shida sana, naweza kukaa miezi maji tusipate. Na kule hapo bondeni nana walikuwa wanatoka maji. Yaani kwa sasa hivi tuna miezi kama 3 hapa yatoki maji, ni bomba lile lile linalotoa maji.
All the taps here have run dry. But once a week, and only for a day, water does start gushing out from a broken pipe in a neighbour's backyard. People come for this water from miles away. It's 7 o'clock in the morning. Flaviana puts her buckets down at the end of the queue. And it will take 3 hours to make it to the front of the line. And the water doesn't come for free. The family in charge of the water source charge 50 shillings per bucket. And on average, the amount of water consumed by a household is 25 buckets a week, which costs $1. For Flaviana, that's half a day's wages. It's 4 o'clock, and back in Zigiro, Zaytouni needs just 1 more bucket of water. There is a supply close by, only 20 minutes away, in a neighbouring village. But it's not Zaytouni's village, and she's not allowed to use the water there.
Kijiji cha Vilabwa tunafukuzwa wakati tukiwakuta wenyewe wanatumwagia maji na tunarudi na ndoo kavu. Tunanyanyaswa sana huku. Kijiji cha pili.
She decides to risk it. She races to the other water point, hoping it's not being guarded. Success. Zaytouni is overjoyed. She uses the water to cook dinner.
Na maji yaliyotosha ndo yalobakia ndo haya. Yale ya nyumbani yameisha kabisa. Yalobakia ndo haya kwa huku.
Back in the city, Flaviana looks back on her day.
Nimekusanya ndoo 22 za maji. Hiyo tunaweza tukapata au tusikose. Kwa sababu gani sasa hivi hatuwekei maanani kwa kila Jumapili tutapata maji.
Maude, we were talking about big corporation control a moment ago, but what that piece demonstrates is that at any level, even at local level, there is someone who controls water, and it's never the women.
No, it's almost never the women, and that was just such a poignant description of what so many millions of women around the world, actually almost in the billions now, live like every day. And sometimes those of us who just take water for granted should just stop and remember looking at that very powerful video. The less power you have in a society, whether that's indigenous or, you know, whatever race or class or whatever, the less water you have. And then within those divisions, if you're a woman, then it's even worse. So it's by gender, by by class and by race, we find that water is becoming an elite privilege, and women in poorer countries are suffering the most. Women in villages, women at the poor end in the slums around the big cities are in a desperate situation, and they'll do anything for this water. They have to have it.
And in the drive to privatise water, taking it out of public hands, making it a corporate commodity, do women end up with even less control? Do they have any influence?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think what the film showed was that even when it's not privately controlled, although they've had that fight in Tanzania, often governments are not able to provide that water because they can't afford it or they're corrupt or whatever. So, I mean, it's not just corporations that are the problem. However, you can always work towards good government and towards equitable government. We're now trying to get a right to water convention at the United Nations that says that water is a fundamental human right and all governments must move towards providing that. But when corporations come in and control it, they have the right to say, we'll deny it to anybody who cannot afford it. In La Paz, in Bolivia, for instance, Suez came in, and they've now been told to get out by the new government, but they promised not to cut anyone off, and they cut off 200,000 indigenous peoples in the hills called El Alto around La Paz because they couldn't pay. And again, I've been in those communities, some of the poorest communities in the world, and it's the women who are having to trek kilometers, miles away to find water, to wash the water, to fight for water, and who are punished if the water isn't forthcoming. And I would love for us to start seeing this more as a women's issue in terms of the fundamental right to water and the role that governments must play in providing this water.
Indeed. Well, Maude, it's been a fascinating discussion. Thank you so much for your input. Maude Barlow speaking to us from the United States there. Now, coming up after the break, the battle for control over this precious commodity. We'll be looking at how women are fighting back and successfully gaining access to water. Stay with us.